I think if you look back, there's been a systemic failure across a whole load of issues to look at the impact of them. And I'll say wherever technology has been concerned, the failure rates have been very high as well. So whether it was ID cards, contact point, the NHS IT programme, regulations on ISPs to comply with certain regulations, all of that was done without proper pre-legislative scrutiny of what the impact would be, both from a technology perspective and a cost perspective. And it's one of my concerns now. Labour's years in power were riddled with failures to understand the impact of a lot of what they were doing until it's too late downstream, and then famously they criticised anyone that pointed out where they've gone wrong, rather than listening and learning. And I think it's a real challenge for the coalition government is what governance structure is it going to put into place to ensure it does understand the total costs and implications of initiatives that it puts into place. And does it have a proper technology policy scrutiny panel that can look at the governance mechanisms, look at the onward costs on business? I think HMRC is another great example. In the news, not just for data loss, but effectively it's outsourced all tax collection to business to gather it both from employees and in terms of VAT and things. There's no recognition of that really to businesses, and HMRC is pretty much the size it was before it outsourced all that collection. You have to say, you know, why is government not getting the same benefit the private sector would take from, in theory, changing and improving the way it does things?
I just pick one thing. When I said that the rules of the game are changing, one of the outcomes of that is the government had to be seen to be doing things. Seen to be known, not necessarily doing them, seen to be doing. And all the old checks and balances, like an impact statement and the consequence of it, were thrown away. One simple example, my solicitor happens to be a friend of mine. He's an officer of my association in East Yorkshire. When I needed to make a small, I think a £20,000 transaction to extend a lease recently, he said, oh, by the way, would you mind driving 40 miles to bring an envelope from one of your commodity suppliers, you know, electricity supplier, whatever, to prove your identity because of money laundering requirements. Absolutely laughable. You know, he knew who I was, actually patently, but we had to go through this charade. And this must happen time and time again, particularly small businesses dealing with their own lawyers, you know, going through these processes. It's just madness. It is the problem about being seen to do something rather than actually doing something effective. Tom?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I agree with both of those comments.
Terry?
I just wanted to say something about the disastrous effect that the policies of the last few years have had on young people, on young Muslim people in particular. I live in the most ethnically diverse place in the country, I'm told, and I've had the advantage of having my youngest son at sixth form college, which is more than 50% Muslim students there, out of 2,000 students. And what we've seen just over the last 2 years is the deterioration in the relationships between the police and the students, and the increasing radicalisation of the students because they are so angry. And certainly my son's pointed out many times that whenever there's been anti-Muslim sentiment in the press, more boys have come in prayer dress, more girls have come in veiled, and they are actually becoming more fundamentalist than their parents. And at the same time, professionally, I'm trying to get information on the Prevent programme, and I'm disappointed that the coalition government appears to be beefing this up rather than getting rid of it at the moment. This is actually gathering intelligence on young people. There are intelligence officers embedded in local councils now, gathering information on children who are likely to become radicalised. And there is such anger about this programme at local level, and such anger amongst Islamic young people. Really, we are creating a very dangerous situation with these supposedly preventative policies. And I wonder what David and Dominic think about this.
Yeah, I think, and you talk about youth and ethnic minority youth. I mean, we've seen a whole range of crazy things. I mean, I think that these mosquitoes, which emit a sound which only children hear. I mean, if ever there was a measure which displaces a problem, doesn't deal with it, and is also fairly abhorrent instinctively about what it says about our society. That is it. I think what we've got to do with our young people, both ethnic minority and generally, is arm them. And the way we arm them in a debate, pro-democracy, pro-liberty, is by actually saying, look, we're standing up for the freedoms of every single citizen, and we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with every different part of the community. I think you've got to be very careful what you ban. I think the idea is that, there's a Prime Minister about banning the burqa. Every time anyone even mentions that, I'm told that the colleges and the university campuses, the use of the burqa goes up because it attracts a massive cachet. I also think we ought to be, for example, with free speech, which is particularly pertinent to campuses, I'm very clear on this. You can say whatever you like, as obnoxious as it may be, as insulting as it may be, until it instigates violence. So with the Danish cartoons, I think actually we've got to put up with that. And in that sense, I don't think we should be cosseting the Muslim community. So that very clearly. On the other hand, when you've got people holding up placards calling it inciting violence, as the protesters did, immediately we ought to have a law enforcement reaction. I think it was actually wrong of the police. I can understand public order implications. It was wrong of the police to wait 6 weeks to deal with that situation. It sends out entirely the wrong message. It should be very clear, pro-free speech, anti-violence, and very clear in terms of the law enforcement.
David, do you want to say something quick?
Yeah, I thought ban the burqa was against our speaker, not against her. One, size of problem. Young people, Muslims, ethnic minorities generally. After my by-election, I had 400 requests to go and speak at universities and schools in the country. The measure of how this issue affects youngsters. Secondly, when I was doing, in the last general election, going around, particularly Lancashire, I found myself time and again speaking in churches full of Muslims, absolutely packed with Muslims. They were there because this was the big issue for them. And so that was of itself. But thirdly, it's not just Muslims, it's any ethnic minority, indeed probably any minority. Because I find black guys coming up to me, you name it, every minority group, because they all feel some sympathy with this. Now, fortunately, you have to tee off several thousand people before you get one radical, and you have to tee off quite a few hundred radicals before you get one terrorist. But nevertheless, we're well on our way if we're not careful. So it's absolutely, Dominic's right. Careful about banning things, but be robust. That's the other thing. That's the other observation. I got cheers from Muslim audiences about being robust, about the Abu Hamzas of the world, and about the pro-violence demonstrations. The people I was talking to were absolutely taking what I describe as a British line, meaning as a constitutional, not a cultural viewpoint of this. And that's wonderful, actually.
And the last question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask all the panelists. You've discussed how ineffectual the measures, the counter-terror measures have been over the last decade, even though millions have been spent on them. So what do you think the real agenda is? Because we've just had these alerts about possible attacks on European airports. Now, the Interior Minister of Germany has denounced these attacks, these warnings, and saying that he doesn't see a threat. And also Pakistan has raised concerns. So do you think that these counter-terror threats really, are they more about controlling the population through fear, since we seem to be on this severe level almost permanently? So that's my question.
Yeah, the threat is real, but it's not existential. Justice Hoffman, when he was scathing about one of the past government decisions in this area, striking it down, made this point that we are not facing the sort of threat we faced in 1930, 1945, a threat to the state and so on. Of course, it's terrible when people are killed, but